This is Jim Fetzer of James Fetzer News with my very special guest, Judyth Vary Baker. It's my privilege to speak with her for the second time. Judyth, your story of your relationship with Lee Oswald in New Orleans is so extraordinary that a host of experts on the assassination have investigated it, including Ed Halsam, Wim Dankbar, Nigel Turner, Jim Mars, Howard Platzman, Peter DeVries, Martin Shackelford, and they all seem to believe in you, Judyth.
Well, that's because they've met me, Jim. They've investigated the information I have. They've grilled me. And also, you might have added there the 60-minute interviewer who 3 times wanted to get this filmed, and it was stopped at the top.
I'm very upset to hear that Dan Rather put the quietus to playing, getting you on 60 Minutes. It would have been a sensation.
Well, as Phil Scheffler said, and then later others, this is something that he will deny, but if he was there at the time, he's not with them anymore. He got caught, in a prevarication, something that he's pretty good at, actually. Oh, I hope I'm not going to get sued now.
You're talking about Dan Rather?
Yeah.
I think he got stung on the report about
W's.
W's.
I think that there are a lot of things that we can go into, but I think what we should focus on, perhaps.
Yeah. Tell me about
what I know about.
Tell me. Did you work with Lee Oswald during the summer of '63 at a coffee company in New Orleans?
Of course, and we were hired the same day. Not only hired the same day, but we worked for a small sub-company that only had about 3 or 4 rooms in it, called Standard Coffee Company, which nobody knew. Not all those researchers never mentioned that Lee Oswald worked for 1 week for the Standard Coffee Company, a subsidiary of Riley. But I was with him, so of course I brought that up, and everybody said, "What are you talking about? You don't know anything." And then they had to look it up, and they found out that Standard had ordered a background report, character finance report on Lee Oswald. And Monahan explains verbally that, Standard is the subsidiary of Riley. Okay, and I have a check from Standard, but Lee doesn't, because there is a double clock out on his records. His time card shows that he clocked out twice after 1 week, and that's because he clocked in as a Riley employee, clocked out as a Standard one, and he did it in the morning, and that meant that he got his check cut in the morning, in the afternoon with Riley instead of Standard.
Now, Judyth, you're implying that you have some documents, records, W-2 forms that substantiate your relationship and working at the Riley?
Absolutely, sure. I wanted to say also about these time cards that nobody ever mentioned the time cards before either. All these researchers, all these years, just took the word of the FBI that they had these time cards, but I had actually signed most of them myself with my initial. And that's on record, and you can see that in the book. Nobody realized they existed. You don't see the time cards in the Warren Commission. In fact, you don't see Riley. Even though Riley Coffee Company, you have all these people being interviewed. One of them said that if they saw Lee sitting there at breaks with a vacant look at his eye, smoking, and Lee never touched cigarettes. Okay, so they have all these spurious interviews and everything from Riley. They're not even in the index. And Monahan, who reads this material about the FBI and all this material about Lee, he's not in the index.
Now, tell me, Judyth, do I understand that there are persons who actually saw you and Lee together in New Orleans?
Yes, we have several witnesses. One of them, very important, a new witness, is Charles Thomas. Charles Thomas is dead, but his family knew about his activities, that he was a customs agent, and that he worked in the anti-Castro thing. He had mafia ties. He was married to a Chitimacha Indian. I was able to find him, and I was able to describe him because he had tattoos on his fingers. He had a German accent, spoke perfect Spanish, and had silver hair, and had worked in customs at Buffalo, New York. So I knew all of this because of my association with Lee. And when the poor girl who was in the family, I was emailing her back and forth and telling her she put on the email, no, because she thought, oh no, he's a bad guy, because everybody thinks Lee Oswald was a bad guy, And so when I visited the family and I showed them all that, they were so relieved to find out who Lee Oswald really was, because their father, their grandfather had never spoken of these things. And anyway, they gave me his photographs and everything. And yes, he did go by the name of Arthur Young. And I had told her I was looking for Arthur Young, and that the name Thomas. And I had actually hunted down this girl because she was half Chitimacha Indian, and her name was Thomas, and it was him. So I was able to prove what he looked like and all that. And they hadn't had the pictures out for several years. She had to go and look to see if he had tattoos on his fingers, and he did. You know, things like that.
Now, Judyth, the name everyone knows is that of Carlos Marcello, who was the head of the mafia in New Orleans at the time. I understand his downtown headquarters was at the 500 Club, and that you and Lee actually visited that club on several occasions.
Yes, we did. But I'm going to go back to Thomas just for a second, because he was the one who expedited Lee's passport in 24 hours. Nobody has ever been able to figure out how that was done in any way. I have the details, so I'll stop there. Yes, we were at the 500 Club, and we were there with Anna Lewis, who was another witness, and her husband. In fact, Anna and David and Lee and I actually double dated. And they criticized David Lewis because he didn't tell Garrison that he knew Lee Oswald that well. David Lewis actually stepped forward bravely after his friend David Vary was murdered. And, well, you could say died of natural causes so conveniently, all right?
Yes.
And, yeah. And so he steps forward and he says, look, I saw Dave Vary. I saw Lee Oswald a couple of times with Guy Bannister. He said things like that because he was angry and upset about what had happened. Now, he didn't go and volunteer that he had dated, with Lee Oswald and this lady, his Oswald's girlfriend. He doesn't go and his wife was pregnant at the time. You just don't go and volunteer that kind of information when somebody wants to lock you up.
Now, Judyth, do I understand that among your visits to the 500 Club, some were in the company of David Vary and even Jack Ruby?
Yes, Jack Ruby was there. Now, when I mentioned this pantheon of people, that they say, come on, how can one person have met all these? This is rather odd to me because Oxner and Sherman knew each other. Sherman and Ferry knew each other. Ferry and Marcello knew each other. Marcello and Bannister knew each other, and so on. They made a ring. And if someone was in that ring, they're going to meet these people. But, that's the way it was.
And David Lewis even worked for Guy Bannister.
Of course he worked for Guy Bannister. He worked for him in 1962. He actually worked for him part-time in 1963. And he with Martin, Jack Suggs Martin, they made a team, an investigative team, and Jack Suggs Martin, seen in the film JFK, getting hit on the head by Guy Bannister. Can
you tell us about the time when Lee took you and Anna and David to meet Carlos Marcello at the 500 Club?
Yes. Well, what happened is, at that point, there was a very important reason why we went there. They don't just do this for fun. Marcello had to be careful when he came in. He had his lawyers with him and everything. He was not supposed to cross over the parish line into New Orleans, but he came and went as he pleased. He just had lawyers with him to give him the excuse if the police would be so stupid as to stand in his way and say, why are you here? We could arrest you for, leaving your parish, because Bobby Kennedy was after him. In fact, the Royal Castle where I worked was right next to the Town and Country. In fact, they shared the exact same parking lot, and that's where Carlos Marcello, behind Town and Country, had his headquarters. Here I'm working at Royal Castle, and it's a dead drop for Bobby Kennedy's spies on Carlos Marcello. And things like this is the reason that Lee originally thought I was in deeper than I was, and I knew more than I did when he met me.
But on some of
So when we went to a place like the 500 Club, we were involved in something else by then. It had nothing to do with bioweapons. It had to do with a gun running operation that was coming in from one of three sister ships from Venezuela. And they got everybody together because they had to work with the stevedores and so on. That whole setup was involved Lee, too, because nobody knew why he distributed literature pastoral literature out at the Dumaine Wharf near the USS Wasp at that time.
Judith,
But they were photographing these people.
Judith, I can't thank you enough for coming on. People who want to obtain your book should go to judithvarybaker.com. They'll find it. I want to thank you so much. I'm very glad that David Lewis didn't report your name to Jim Garrison. You might not be chatting with me today.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. I just wanted to try and get another few words